startups could be a part of this. Couple of startups are working on COVID solutions. One of them
Okay.
with Pune Municipal Corporation, and few of them have got some last minute sort of presentations and also. Not everyone are a part of it, but we are going to record so that this reaches out to everyone within the community. So that's one thing.
Okay.
And second, to all the participants, all our cohort members, very important is the technology that we feel that important in your entrepreneurial journey, and then you are at a juncture, quite a few of them would need support around tech. And the organization D10X, mainly they look out for startups. They have the background. So rather Anandji and the speakers that we have, that is Nitinji, who are the co-founders of D10X. They have gone through the entrepreneurial journey themselves. And very important is the technology, due diligence, and certain aspects that startups struggle at during their journey. I believe they come in at the right point and then help them like a partner or a collaborator, not as a vendor. I believe that's the key word out here. And that is what we are looking at as a potential partnership. So over to you, Anandji. I believe you could start off, and then we want to do this more like an interactive session, wherein if at all if certain startups have got any queries, I'm sure we'll take this up once your presentation is done. So over to you, sir.
Thank you for a very kind introduction.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. And really congratulations to be part of the AIC and its entrepreneur journey that we also started a few years back, and we're enjoying every bit of it. Right. So the whole idea was, as Udayji also said, that we would like to share our experiences and lessons learned, and what really works in this whole journey of entrepreneurship, and how do we ensure, most importantly, that we ensure success, okay, of the startups. And umpteen number of times you've seen a lot of articles also around why startups fail, and there are plenty of reasons cited. Many of them are related to the business side. Some of them talk about investment not achieved and so forth. But we see that 95% of the startups fail, and that's a statistic that has widely been published. And it is not just here in India, it is everywhere across the world. Of course, the numbers may vary between 90 and 95% and so forth. But many a times, most founders, as we also had, this whole notion that it is about capturing the market, it is about the phenomenal growth, it is about how do we raise funds and grow about it. Of course, these are all important aspects of growing. Okay, but it will be surprising to know, if we look at the root cause analysis of many of the startups, and if we study the case studies of many startups which we have done, we find that technology and execution are also equally important. And most often than not, these are ignored factors in ensuring success of the startups. And if you look at on the most visible startups are the unicorns that have grown to $1 billion in market cap and so forth. But there are, it's just like tip of the iceberg, right? So there is a lot hidden behind under the water, which nobody gets to see. And that is where, when we connect to a lot of people, we understand that these startups have a lot of stories to tell. And a lot of learning to be made in this whole game, right? So we thought of coming together of a quick presentation. Of course, this is not a idea that you'll learn something new, but here we are. We all are entrepreneurs, and we have a lot to share as experiences, right? So we have put together this small introduction and presentation about why do startups fail, and there are several reasons. I hope everybody is able to see the screen correctly.
Yeah. It's perfectly fine. Please go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. So one of the reasons quite often found is that we don't have the right team in place, or the team is not fully equipped well, right? So obviously you cannot judge a fish by its ability to climb up a tree, right? So uh, having a good team in place is absolutely essential for a startup. And many times what happens is we get some people connected, we create that excitement, uh, we have a bright idea in place and we want to execute on that, and we put together a team that we come across very quickly, and we don't put a lot of attention to the skill sets and what is really required. And many times we find that the startup founders are graduating out of colleges. They are all young, bright people who have a lot of ideas. They have ideas about making big in life, but what they do is they lack the experience on they may be good on technology side and ideas and enthusiasm, but what they lack typically is the experience of how to put the technology to the best use in business. How do we grow business? How do we capture the market? Then how do we raise funds? How do we grow? How do we execute our team, or how do we build our team for the execution side? And the execution has to be flawless, right? And for which the team is very, very important. The second part, which typically is lacking in most startups, is the ability to network. Okay, and because many companies are either not connected to the net, and thanks to the initiatives like AIC, where a lot of startups are being brought together, they share ideas, they share the experiences, the knowledge sharing sessions such as this helps quite a lot in networking. And most importantly, it is not just about the knowledge sharing, but the ability to network and get to the right person at the right time very quickly, so that we don't need to keep searching for where do we find help, right? So such platforms are extremely important. uh, the other most common or reason for failure is that we find a good idea, we implement it according to the best of our ability to understand the customer's need, and we quickly build something. Either we spend a lot of time and money and effort and investments in building that, and then we try and take it out to the market and talk to the customers, and the customer finds that it is not built for them, right? And that is where the product, however good is anticipated, fails to really click in the market, right? So whether the product is really the need of a customer, and is it built for a particular customer or a segment of the industry, is a very important aspect that we need to look at. And it's not just about how the product is and how the business model around that is, but who is the real customer, and whether what value the customer is going to derive out of this, right? So user experience is very important. The other aspect, of course, is getting the right kind of investments. Many startups have bright ideas, but they are not able to show the traction for their product, and hence they fail to raise the investments, whether it's early stage or series A, B, C, and whatever, right? PE funding. But apart from just failure to raise the funds at the right time, uh, I've seen a lot of cases where people are not putting their money to the best use. And that is again going back to the execution side of it. How do you manage the cash flows? That's also very important aspect, because cash flow is far more important in the startup arena, where every penny counts, every rupee or every paisa counts here, right? And how you spend it, at what rate you spend it, and are you spending your money, whether it's bootstrapped or if even if you raise funds, how well it is spent from the ROI perspective is also very, very important. Having the right tools in place, right? So whether um, uh, talking about technology here, are we equipped to build the right product, and how good is your development process? How good is your testing? How good you're able to try out new things? if you need to implement a new feature, how quickly you can get it out to the customer. And tools play a very, very important role in ensuring the success or efficiency of your business. And usually startups are pretty lean in the efficiency thing. So unlike the large conglomerates and large corporations, there is no red tape, there is no bureaucracy. But so startups are pretty quick and nimble, but at the same time their efficiency of getting to the customer, from the requirements to the features that you deliver to the customer, how long is this cycle time, and how well you are able to cater to your customer's requirement, plays a major role. And a lot of that too is to do with the tools that you are equipped with. The most common factor we have seen here is the burnout, right? So the startup founders have a lot of ideas. They try and do everything. They run helter skelter. Um, as startup, we all have experienced this, right? So there is no team. Uh, there is a guy for finance, a guy for marketing, guy for sales, guy for accounting, guy for execution, a person for testing. We don't have those luxuries of multiple teams and one person for one function, right? So the founders typically end up working from being a sweeper to CEO of the organization. And what that typically results in is the burnout. So in enthusiasm, we do a lot of things initially, and we burn the midnight oil and so forth. But usually we have found that uh, the startup founders have to focus on the business side of it, what your customer really wants, what features, functionalities you're going to get to the customer, how's your product being marketed, how's your product being positioned. You also have to have an excellent understanding of what possible competition is and what they're trying to do, what are the industry trends, okay, what technology is kind of going to disrupt the market if you want to disrupt anything, right? So most startups are expected to disrupt the market, right, in order to have any kind of hope to grow. So in order to focus on all of this, and by the way, these things cannot be outsourced to anybody, right? So the startup founders have to be putting their entire focus on ensuring that these things are taken care of, and your business is successful. But what can be outsourced well is the technology and execution part. And that is where we found that we also experienced this before. And I'm going to share a case study with you after this slide. My own startup that we had founded about 6 or 7 years ago, a very bright idea, and what experiences we had. Very soon in the next slides you will see. But again, this burnout is a killer, right? I mean, most startups fail because of this founder's burnout. And of course, putting the horse to the cart, right? So you may have an excellent product in place, but how quickly you can get that out to the customer, and how you are able to deliver, matters a lot. And that is where again technology and execution play a very, very important role in ensuring whether your customers needs are met with your excellent product in place. Now, having said all of this, right, when it comes to technology, and you'll find that many startups in India are technology driven. And by the way, this is not just about technology startups, tech startups, I would say. In any form, whether it's manufacturing, there is IoT, which is basically doing a lot of revolution, because from the manual machinery, PLCs played a lot of role in automating stuff. Then came the CNC machines and so forth. A CAD, CAM, and CAE also revolutionized the way the ideas are brought to the manufacturing, and the ensuring that the first time right execution happens. But now there is a lot of new shift that is happening towards Industrial Revolution 4, which is largely driven by the industrial IoT. And that IoT thing is also driving a lot of things in agriculture, in education, in manufacturing, in supply chain, logistics, and so forth. And there are multitude of businesses that are being driven uh, by this new trend. That is, of course, that's a disruption, but at the same time, and then technology actually plays a role in this. And so it's not just about software part as a tech startup. The many startups that are operating in these domains also are driven by technology and execution. So let me take you to one of the case studies. My own startup, it's called InstaDelight. And me and my friend, we had an idea about, okay, we all use the loyalty cards, and you'll find that most of the five-star hotels and airline industries have been using loyalty cards as plastic card, credit card size plastic card, which you need to carry, right? So you go to Shopper Stop, you go to Lufthansa, you go to any large Marriott hotels and so forth. You have to flash this card to get rewards or loyalty programs and so forth. And that is where most of these uh, businesses actually ensured loyalty. They doled out a lot of rewards and discounts and so forth on that plastic card. But as a customer, you were supposed to carry your plastic card all the time in your wallet. And so the number of cards that you can carry also started growing and making your wallet fat, not just because of the money in it, right? So we thought, why not we came up with the idea of having a digital engagement card or a loyalty card, and we call it a DEC, right? And by the way, this DEC, we have applied for a patent over here. It's patent pending platform. But we wanted to combine all of these marketing tools for a small and medium enterprise into one application. And there was a custom consumer application on the mobile. There was a business application for a business owner, small and medium enterprise owner. And then there was a platform behind it. It was a very powerful concept which combined the offers and coupons, product information. There was a ordering and mobile payments, and the loyalty and rewards. The rewards could be in the form of loyalty points or I mean, different businesses call it differently. Like the CCD, the Cafe Coffee Day calls it beans, right? So there are multiple ways in which it is called, right? So in short, it was a program which combined all of these marketing tools into one application in the hands of the business owner as well as the customer. And the customer, of course, did not have to carry multiple cards. They could simply have one application installed on the mobile which had multiple cards stacked into the thing, right? And this is how the card looked like. And it has all the coupons and offers. And so this is one way for a small and medium businesses to reach out to a customer and have constant touch with the customer. It was also equipped with a lot of feedbacks and so forth. I'll just rush through this. It is not the marketing material, but we should actually learn quite a lot in this. So all in all, I wanted to say is it's a pretty sexy thing with the application. It had multiple tools in it, the rewards, the reviews, or online ordering. All of that was cool, right? So um, and at the same time, it also provided the business intelligence to the business owner. And so you didn't have to have a large team managing your customer loyalty program. So we got those tools in the hands of small and medium customer, whether it's a salon owner or beauty parlor or restaurant owner, a small hotel, any grocery store. So it applies to many different businesses. Okay, so that's the cool concept we came up with. We also applied for a patent of it. It is still pending. So all in all, a very cool product, right? But now you will ask, okay, why did it fail? Okay, so the whole idea was that it failed, and we had to pack our bags, and there were lots of learnings, and we spent a lot of our own money invested on it. We also tied up with a company for marketing this product in Dubai. We were hugely successful also, in the sense that we signed up 100 plus merchants in a month's time on this program. Of course, why we wound up was not because of just the technology part of it, but we had a lot of lessons uh, because of that. Of course, we did wind up because the market was not ready for this kind of concept yet, the early mover thing. So we faced challenges over there. The other was that there was a marketplace that is now becoming popular. So the whole idea was that small and medium businesses would want to promote their own brand, but they apparently they prefer to be part of a marketplace like Amazon and so forth, and sell their products that way, right? So it still is a powerful product, and it is not out in the market anywhere. So there is no competition even today for this. But we found that so as founders, we were focused on the business side, getting out in the Dubai market, signing up many customers and so forth. But we had outsourced our product development to three different IT companies, and those many companies in India, unfortunately, you will find that the IT industry, IT sector has grown as a services sector. So all they have is the services mindset, the project mindset. So they look at your features, functionality, your requirements as project. So they develop it for you, but normally they fail to understand that it's a product and it has to be maintained, it has to have a life, it has to have a performance, it has to have that user experience. So while we were looking at completely focused on the business side of it and growing the company and managing the cash flows and the user experience, because we were also talking to a lot of vendors out in the market, so we were always on the road looking at the business side of it. But the product development suffered quite a lot. I mean, we had a lot of technical issues in the product, and we had to spend a lot of energy, time, and of course we had that burnout, where because we didn't have the right IT partner who looked at it as a product, right? So as I said, there was many things like, okay, it's a native app versus web app, or it should be a progressive hybrid app. We all come from IT industry, by the way, and we have an excellent understanding of how which technology works what way. But still, we we were undecided about whether we should use a native app or web app or hybrid, because our mind share was not just there, right? We had to choose a .NET platform for our this thing. So I'm not saying .NET is bad, but all I'm saying is the way the choice was made is because the service provider that we outsourced it to was comfortable working on .NET platform. It was a Microsoft house, right? So quite often the choice of technology is also driven by what a service provider is comfortable with, and not about what is the right tech stack that you need to have for your own application, right? Uh, the other part is the consumer and business apps communicated with the platform through web services. Now, because there were multiple service providers, again, because of their own comfort, the native applications had to talk to the platform, .NET platform through web services, and we had a hard time matching those, the formats and so forth. So senior developer implemented the specs, but with the quality was so bad that it was as good as a engineering project. I mean, the projects we do in engineering, it was a pretty rudimentary development. The quality of code was really bad, and we could not have built a multi-story building on this weak foundation, right? So that was something that was letting us lose our good sleep at night, right? And we also built our own CRM because we wanted to have the supply chain built in, and then we wanted to have the customer signed up, and we could achieve signing up a customer and getting them go live in 20 minutes time flat, right? So that also was achieved quite a lot, and our focus was on that. Okay, so all in all, all I'm trying to say is, since we also came from the, in spite of we coming from the IT background, as founders at bootstrapped startup, we were completely focused on the business side, customer side, and growth side of the business, and we just could not do justice to the technology part. And that's where we found that there is a serious lacking in the market today of a good technical partner who can who can shoulder the whole responsibility of building a product, and such a robust product with the right tech stack in place, that we don't need to worry about the IT side of it or the technical issues part of it, right? And that is the whole reason why we learned these lessons and then founded D10X, a company that is totally focused on technology. We are the advisories to startups uh, with our experience, years of experience. So each of us, we are 4 partners, and each of us have about 25 years of experience in the global market as far as our industry is concerned. So we have played multiple roles in business development, the IT operations management, scaling up, the tech part, the solution architecture part, and so forth. So we have played multiple roles, and we bring this whole experience on the table for startup companies, and that is where we founded D10X. Okay, so so this case study that I showed is not the only one. There are many such cases, and there's a lot to learn from these startups, and that's where the D10X actually plays a role. D10X is about 10x growth, ensuring that you are successful, you are able to grow multifold, and we want to be the technology partner, the product partner for you. Okay, and we are not just a services, we are not at all a services outsourcing company or IT company just in the same thing. So we are more like an advisory, right? So what we do is we take on the product development, we build a team dedicated for our partner company, and build solutions or build products which are right for the application, which are right for the market. And because we understand both sides of the business, we are able to make the choices about, okay, not about what we are comfortable developing in, but what is good for the product. Okay, that is one. Second is, we are totally focused on product development, so we have our own tools. We have the very advanced kind of tools that we have developed ourselves that automate the entire process of shortening your time from the requirements to deployment of the feature, right? So how quickly you hear about the requirement from a customer, and how quickly you are able to turn that out to the customer from the fulfillment standpoint. So only then you are able to grow very rapidly. Okay, so we also do tech due diligence, just like any financial due diligence. We do, even if you have your own tech product, we can do a due diligence for your product, and we can identify which areas are weaker, because the chain is as good as the as strong as the weakest link. And we are able to identify which technologies, which parts of your product will not scale, and which will really prove a big roadblocks for you down the line, right? So that is where again we provide the recommendations in terms of what things need to be changed, whether you need a refactoring or some components need to be rewritten or something. And it's again your choice whom you want to get it developed from, but we provide the kind of we provide the red flags, we identify the risks that you will be facing as you grow, from the scalability standpoint, the user experience standpoint, and so forth. And as a whole, we also provide the CTO services, because we have really the specialist on board because most of the startups don't or can't afford a full-time CTO. but at the same time, it doesn't undermine the importance of having a good CTO in place. If you really want to scale up, if you really want to be a unicorn, you need to have a very robust foundation for your product, whichever product it could be, whether it's tech product or not. You need to have a good product head, the CTO, right? And that is where we also provide the advisory or CTO services. So that is what D10X is about, and wanted to actually show the case study as well as the as well as wanted to show what we do from the D10X standpoint. And we actually look at the every aspect of your business and provide you the solutions. I mean, the solution could be not the new ones, but it could be some minor changes in your existing products also, can help you grow, can help you scale. And that is where D10X comes from, right? So now I'll request Nitin, one of our co-founders, and he's really the technical expert. He has actually built many generations of good software developers over the last 25 years, and he still codes. And he's involved with multiple of a multitude of projects. He has seen a lot of projects. He has turned around a lot of engagements, from a real disaster to something that was a big success story. So I would now hand over to Nitin, and he would actually talk about the 10 commandments we decided or defined as part of this success. I mean, these 10 things, these 10 factors, if we can take care of, can ensure success for any startup. And that is where we have actually put this whole together, right? So over to you, Nitin.
Thank you, Anand. Give me a minute. It seems Air Force is conducting some flybys on in Pune.
Yes, I could hear that as well. Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Nitin.
Yeah. So let me give you some background about myself. So I have about 25 years of experience in software development. I have worked in multiple technologies, programming languages, operating systems, and different domains, from web development to computational geometry to all kinds of interesting stuff. I did a very interesting project for Honda for their car exterior design. And in all this, my background is metallurgy. So my graduation, post-graduation is metallurgy and not really in software. So I was in Geometric in an engineering software company. So I have a fair idea about what goes in manufacturing, manufacturing software, enterprise software. And then I started into my own startup. So I have a fair idea about various problems that startups face. So based on this experience and based on talking with these people, when we started D10X, we wanted to have our core principles that we'll follow. And these principles are from three perspectives. One is the perspective of the company or the founder. Other is a perspective of the customers. And third is a perspective of the employees. So we'll go through these principles. But as you find, what I want to point out is these principles are not just for software. These are applicable to any kind of company now. So even if you are doing a manufacturing or a IoT or a hardware software mix and all these kind of things, the principles will still be adopted. So let's go to first principle. Anand, can you go to the first principle? Yeah. So our first principle is we'll start making profit when our customer starts making revenue. And there is a very specific reason why we started with this. It's because when we go to typical, hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So when we go to typical software projects company, you either have a choice of man month or you have a choice of fixed cost. And whichever choice you take as a customer, the software development company has no skin in the game, in the sense that they don't really care you succeed or you fail, right? As long as they get their money, it's done. So which means they can show you a demo which says, oh, it works, and you test it and you say, yeah, great, and it works for 50 people. The moment your customer starts going to 100, 200, 500, things starts becoming slow, because nobody has thought of scaling. And it's not their business that will suffer. They will still get paid. It's your business that will get suffer. The bigger problem is you don't realize it till you get the software in your hand. You have already paid for them or paid for their services, and then you realize it's not working out. So we have situations where we faced where a few of the D10X customers actually went through 3 such partners, so-called partners. So we want to be true partner. So we put a condition on ourselves that we'll break even. Okay, we'll charge customers, make profit when customer starts making revenue, and if he doesn't start making revenue, then our profit will be really low. So then we have a skin in the game. Then we will look really from customer's point of view and says, oh, if I suggest this, my customer's revenue will increase twofold, and which also means our profit will also increase. So that's our key thing. We want to have a skin in the game. And the way we do that is on a very basic principle that we start making profit when our customer starts making revenue. And then can we go to next commandment? Okay. So we want to be good. We want to be fast at a fair cost. We will not always be cheap. Now, when I say cheap, if you say like, what is your man-month cost? Probably will not be cheap. But what is your total development cost? If you look at a say 1 year cost or a 2 year cost, you will find that we are definitely the best supplier around, because we deliver quality, we deliver functionality, and we deliver it at a fair cost so that we don't burn or unnecessary stretch your cash flow. Next principle, we take quality very, very seriously. So that is why it says that we will not ship shit under any circumstances. Even if customer says that is fine, I'm okay for a bad quality at this point, we don't ship shit. Because we feel that, right? So what is a samskar? If we do something bad, it nags to our mind that no, we have not, this is not the way, this is not correct. Quality is our samskar. If we don't deliver quality, it continuously gives a nagging feeling to us. Fourth principle is we deliver releases and updates frequently to end user. So we want to put the latest things as early as possible into the user's hand. And this is mainly to get user feedback. And you will find that multiple business roles actually suggest it, but very few deliver it. Companies like Google or Amazon make 5,000 feature updates a day into their software. A typical project company will do one release a month. Okay. Which means if you want to get a feedback, you have already wasted 1 month of development efforts, And after 1 month of development effort, you may end up actually dropping that feature or doing lots of bug fixes. One of the way you can check is ask if you have outsourced it, your software development to someone, and if you find a spelling mistake in your website, ask them how much time it will take to fix it. A lot of time you will get 1 day, 2 day, 5 day kind of answers. We usually did it in like minutes. Okay. And it makes a hell lot of difference. If you read the book named Creativity Incorporated, this is a book by CEO of Pixar, Disney and Pixar. And Pixar has a reputation of delivering 10 consecutive hits, animation hits, highest grossing. And the way they did it was they got feedback every week from their internal team, and then they tweaked till it became perfect. And one of the principles they followed was and I'll come to it slightly later, but sometimes preventing bugs has much higher cost than allowing the bugs to go and quickly fixing it. So we try to balance this. We try to be careful so that bugs are not added, but our systems are designed in such a way that if bug is there, we'll be able to fix it quickly and deliver the new release in customer's hand. And to do that, we need to deliver very frequently. That's our fourth principle. We focus about quality. I already told you we will not ship shit, and we deliver quality rather than fixing bugs. So that's one of our key principle, and we teach our developers very, very seriously to prevent bugs, to code in such a way that bugs are detected as early as possible rather than as late. Okay, we build software in such a way that even when we make production release, bugs are reported directly from production server to us. A lot of times we have seen that customer says, oh, one of my customer faced this bug, and the development team says, no, we are not able to reproduce it, and the bug remains in the system. We proactively add tools so that bugs are automatically detected and fix it. You know, in if you are any of you are mechanical engineers, typically there is a design called jigs and fixtures. So the reason we do jigs and fixtures is because we want to ensure that final releases or the final product we make is fast, it has good quality, and it has low variations. And the jigs and fixtures allow you to do that. So we do develop exactly same kind of jigs and fixtures in software. The next step we are careful about is we start small. Okay, we don't start with a 50 people, 20 people team. We start with a 3 people team, and that 3 people team develops your core. Think about it when you are making a building. The initial architecture team who is designing your building is really small, maybe 4 or 5 people. So if you suddenly start with the construction with 500 people without a detailed and initial design and framework in place, you can imagine what kind of chaos it will create. Exactly same thing happens when you start with a big team. But now, if you are paying for man month, then your benefit, what is of your benefit and what is of the software development team's benefit is at odds. Okay? Because you're paying on man month, bigger the team, bigger the revenue the software company makes. Okay? But you lose more cash flow, right? But at the same time, if you start with 10 people team or a 15 people team, initial code design gets all confused and the chances of failure increase. So we are very careful to start small, create a strong foundation, and then build a 100-story building on top of that foundation. Then our initial speed may be slow because there are only 4 people working on it. But once your foundation is strong, we can deliver a lot faster. And I think every software company or every startup grows through this phase where you have a very small core team and then you grow as needed. The problem is sometimes you get funding and all of a sudden you grow 100 times, and that can cause lots of problems. We nurture what we call 3Ps, and these 3Ps are good processes, good practices, and good policies. You know, processes, manufacturing process, development process, we document it, we put a lot of thought on it. But sometimes documented process and what people are actually following, that is the practices, diverge a lot. So we focus on both. We say you how to define good processes and we have to define and follow good practices. And following good practices means we spend a lot of time teaching our team good practices, coaching them, helping them, correcting their mistakes, even allow them to make mistakes to certain extent so that they learn from it. Then we define good policies. And when I mean policies, these are typically like what is your HR policy, leave policy, and all kinds of stuff. So there also our policy, any policy in it's our philosophy that any policy you define, there will be few people who will take undue advantage of that policy. And we discover one guy taking undue advantage, we add more restrictions on it, and in the end we end up punishing the other 99 guys who are actually following those policies. So we are very cautious about defining the policies, and that is why we have a principle that our 3Ps are one for 1P. Our processes, practices, policies are for our people. And when I say our people, they are for our customers as well as for our employees, and we need good policies for them. So you need policies which benefit them and not to hinder their work. Our ninth principle is what we call fail fast. Now it goes in various ways. If you have seen, Toyota is lowest cost manufacturer but very high quality of cars, and they have a philosophy that when they are manufacturing cars, anybody in the assembly line can stop the assembly line. Okay. So they stop the assembly line, fix the bug, and continue the assembly line rather than convert car. Because of that, their total cost is lot less. And we apply this concept of fail fast to software. So we try to, our systems are designed in such a way that bugs are detected early, problems are detected early, and they are fixed early. Because the problems are detected early, the cost of fixing those problems are pretty low. For example, you are designing a IoT, IoTs, you have some test pins on that. And when you're manufacturing it, a small initial board itself, you detect, oh, the input that I have received and the chip I have received is bad. I will not put it in my product. Okay. You have saved a lot of cost on the downstream assembly line. So that is a principle we follow consistently. And we advise the startups which are working with us also to follow it. So when we start with a startup, we always create what is called as a MVP, a minimum viable product. So we create a bare minimum features for that product. We show the live product to the end user. We ask them to use it. We collect their feedback. And sometimes it happens that even though it seems like a good idea initially, but turns out that people are not ready for it yet. So rather than spending a year and the 40-50 lakh rupees on that idea, we can create a MVP in initial 2-3 months with 2-3 people. Your cost is lot low, and then we can decide you want to continue or not continue. And if you want to continue, at that point you really have a working product which you can take to venture funds for funding. So this is really key to deliver good quality and the lowest cost, total cost in terms of for the software. The last step, and this is our philosophy we teach to all our employees, is we reward success, we reward failure. In day-to-day development activities also, they have to take a decision, right? And so that decision can sometimes go wrong. And remember, so we teach people, take a decision. It's okay if it goes wrong sometimes. But if the decision goes wrong, detect it and fix it as early as possible. Don't sit on the failure. So if you combine the reward success and failure with fail fast, you will find that our chances of success increase a lot and our cost of failure is drastically reduced. So we say punish inaction. You don't take a decision and you sit on that, we punish that. You succeed or fail, that's fine. Of course, if you continuously fail, then there is some problem and we have to track that. But occasional failure is fine, as long as you control the cost of that failure. Even if you don't control the cost of that failure occasionally, we still help our team members on how do you reduce that cost? How do you fail fast? That is the core philosophy of that we teach to our teams. So I think that's what we follow, and I hope you liked it and at least follow some of the principles. I will urge everyone in the startup business to seriously look at fail fast principle. And if you search on internet for fail fast, and if you go to Paul Graham's website, by the way, Paul Graham is the guy who founded Y Combinator venture fund, and Y Combinator has funded successful startups like Dropbox, Airbnb, and they have a stellar track record of selecting and supporting startups. If you check the kind of advice Paul Graham gives, one of the advice is fail fast. Other advice is to take your technology seriously. It doesn't say software, technology. Your architecture, manufacturing design, the product design, the user interface, all that, if you do a bad job there, the chances of success drastically reduce. You may get an initial success, but scaling it up becomes a problem. Okay. Any questions or queries so far?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nitinji. Really amazing. I mean, thanks a lot for your inputs. I have a couple of questions. There's Uday here, but then before that, I would like few of the participants are startups to ask if they have anything specific to their businesses, because I'm sure they would be keen to engage with you. So if they have any specific things, maybe let's just ask them, and then I'll ask a couple of questions. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Carl. I just had a couple of questions actually. One was on the model which you guys follow. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello.
Please.
Yeah. See, you mentioned that. So if I come to you with a product spec, right, and I ask you for development, so how do you go about with the team? Is it an existing team? Do you get new people, or do you source from inside? That's on the development side. And then once it moves into operations and support, does that team continue, or is it a pool of resources you take from your existing operations team? So how does that model work? That was one question. Sorry, I'll ask both my questions and then you can answer. The second one was a more business related question. You were talking about development at cost and then using the customer, taking a share of the revenue which your customer is making to get your profits. Now, you are not going to sell the product. The customer is actually selling the product, and there's a lot of implication in terms of selling, marketing expenses, his sales channels, his model for all of that. So how do you balance the two? You really don't have control over his sales process, but you're still expecting him to sell enough for you to make money. So I was just curious about that, because it's a thought which we've been having. So I just wanted to understand, how do you manage that as well?
Okay, so let me answer the technology question. I'll let Anand answer the business part of it. See, as I said, we start with a very small team. So typically we start in the first month, we start with maybe typically 2 people who will start working, talking with you on discussing and deliver about what should be the architecture. And one of the thing we look at is who are your users, what is their scale, For example, if you are trying to sell to say enterprise, the typical medium enterprise may have 100 users at a time. But if you are going for consumer market, then sometimes you have to support maybe 100,000 users in a day. Okay. Now, the moment you have that kind of thing, your architecture changes a lot. Okay. But if I have to do a full-fledged architecture that can support 100,000 people from day one, the cost is very high. So we have to create a roadmap of what is the initial one will require, but we have to always keep in mind that our ultimate target is 100,000 users at a time. Okay, so these are the kind of things where we spend our initial 1 month, where we get a core team working, and we have tie-ups with the best experts around. So we have tie-ups with best UX experts, the guys who have written books on UX. We have tie-ups with chatbot experts, AI experts, machine learning experts, data scientists. So depending on your need, we involve them in our initial discussion to get the UX work. So once the basic UX is done, then we start building your MVP. Again, at this point, we keep our team small. So in the initial, since we are keeping the team small, the first 1 month, we always get at least 2 of our developers in place, and maybe get 2 more from outside contract or anything. But typically within next 2 to 3 months, the contract guys are released and we get the new team in place. Okay. Now the team that is going to work with you, they are the guys who are going to run your servers. They are the guys who are going to run the deployment. They are the guys who are going to do the development. Typically our deployments are entirely automated. So our deployment typically means, okay, push a button and the server gets updated. That kind of level of automation we do in first 2 months. So a day-to-day operation wise, the way our team works and a typical conventional software company works, there is a lot of difference. And as our team grows, we obviously, my experience is, if a team, if the same guy works in the same team for 2 years, slowly his learning stops. So we try to rotate people, but we don't suddenly say that, okay, you have 20 people working, we want to pull out 10. No, we have a slow rotation policy where we move people from one project to another project to different technology. We have what we call full stack developers. So they work on front end, back end both. They work on multiple technologies. I myself have programmed in 9 different programming languages over years. So I've programmed in .NET, Python, Perl, PHP, Java, C++. So JavaScript. Because of that, we are able to guide team, and because of that, when we select a technology, we focus on what you need, what kind of scale you need, what kind of deployments you need. Take for example that you want to deploy in enterprise application. Now I can develop your code in Python, but Python is a scripting language. So when I deliver the code for enterprise application, essentially I'm delivering source code. Now a lot of MSME companies, it is possible that they will just copy the source code. Now in such scenarios, if we are doing an enterprise development, we'll probably choose a .NET or Java so that you get a compiled code and source is not available. However, if you are going for a SaaS platform where you are doing the deployment and code is always in your control and you have to do fast feature development and changes, then we suggest go for Python or some other technology. So we look at your business and what is the scale that business is going to be, and then we choose the appropriate technology. We don't suggest that we know .NET, so we will develop it in .NET. That's a stupid way to select a technology. So Carl, have I answered your question?
Yes. Yeah. So it's an existing pool which you have, and you keep rotating people within that pool on a slow burn perspective. I was just wondering whether you're recruiting new people for each project and then deploying them on specific projects. So that's what I wanted to hear.
No, we do recruit new people, but we recruit it something like a third month or so.
Okay.
We always start with our own core team.
I see.
Because
Okay.
if your team as your product starts growing, that is the time you will need more people, and that's time we recruit.
No, understood. I understand the slow burn which you're doing upfront. That I got.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I think you've answered my question. Thanks.
Carl, about your next question on the business side of it, right? I mean, it's a pretty pertinent question, and anybody would have that in mind in terms of, oh, how do you make money then? So the whole idea of farming D10X, I mean, it is on those 10 commandments that we came up with, right? And these are purely coming from our experiences that we have had, the experiences many people have shared, the kind of study we have done on the startup ecosystem, why startups have failed, and that's how we have come up with these 10 practices or best practices, so to say. And the first one talks about what's different about D10X. And since D10X helps out a lot of startups, we fully understand, and we ourselves being part of these startup founders and people who have founded companies and bootstrapped their startups, we understand the importance of cash flow. And we understand that, okay, I mean, we don't want to be cheap, because we are not. We are experts. But at the same time, how do we ensure that it becomes easier for the startups to manage? And because you cannot hire an expert, because experts come at a lot of cost, startups end up having their own people, and then they fail ultimately, right? So we wanted to actually bridge this gap, and that is where we said, okay, there has to be skin in the game. Because if I'm an outsourced partner and I start charging you for time and material or fixed price, my goal will always be to make most profits, because it's my business and I have to be successful. I have to start making a lot of money, and I'll make money off of you, right? So for every change, even if it's a fixed price project, I'll start quoting you a lot of effort. I'll put a lot of effort in the buffer in the efforts, and start quoting you more, or my time and material rates will kind of keep going up, and ultimately it will not be a win-win situation, right? So your question is pretty pertinent about you will be focused completely on your business development, and we will be your product partner. So how do we ensure that you do your job well and we start making money, right? So it's about having skin in the game, and we totally trust you, because only when we allow the startup founder to focus completely on their own business, we both are successful, right? So that is the whole principle on which we started this. Now the next question is, okay, how do we share profits, right? So there are multiple ways, and we are very flexible about it. So when you start making your revenues, we can also decide on some success fee, which could be a lump sum payment, or it could be part of the revenue, or it could be equity. Whichever way the startup founder is comfortable with, we can agree on some milestones, some principles, and then we can get engaged. So initially, even if we are executing at cost and not making any money, we obviously are not a no profit organization. It's not an NGO, so we obviously have to pay our bills. So we look at the revenue sharing, or it could be part of the success fee, but only it starts trickling in when you start making money yourself. So we are in the same boat, right? So that's the whole principle about this whole model, and that makes D10X different.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Anyone? Anant, I believe we have Anant, Nikesh, Shefalika, Tarang. Questions from anyone?
No
Okay.
questions from me.
Okay. Not a problem, Taranji.
Either we did a very good job or very bad job, if there are no questions.
No, so couple of things. One is definitely about the cost, and you said that you'll start with small and the team, and about also understanding requirement from a startup as well. So that engagement again, it's resource intensive, and then how do you really kind of work with the startups? Is there any fee or how that engagement is what my main question was, because we are looking at couple of startups that may have this requirement, so just wanted to kind of know about this.
Okay, there are multiple ways I would answer this. One is,
Sure.
as I mentioned, D10X has three distinct offerings, right? So the first one is the tech due diligence. So if a startup founder wants us to have a look at or eyeball the architecture, the design, and the quality of code, the team, the business case, the customer, and so forth, we look at various aspects of the business. We look at the code, we look at the architecture, we run our own diagnostic tools that we have developed to identify where the problems are, where the risk areas are, and we also recommend the paths to mitigate the risk, right, in the tech due diligence. Now that typically happens where 3 or 4 levels have been defined, and how deep you really want to go on the tech due diligence, and the costing is based on that, right? So so that is as far as the tech due diligence is concerned. It's typically a fixed fee kind of thing, but that depends on 4 different levels predefined in terms of what is really your need and how big you see or foresee the risk on your own code, and how happy you have been about your own product. So that's one. The other part is about CTO services. So it's a shared CTO role, and most likely Nitin or somebody senior from our team would get involved with your team as part of the CTO, and they'll be embedded with your team as part of, again, skin in the game. But there's a fixed fee per month, etc. It's not a full-time role, so that works pretty economical for the startup. Now, the third and most important one is the outsourced product development, right? So only when when any startup wants to develop a product, we start small, as Nitin said. We start with typically 2 or 3 people, and we do it at cost. And we decide on what are the milestones, when do we start really, what should be the success fee, whether it should be a lump sum payment or revenue share. It could be 5% of revenue or something like that, right? So we do discuss and decide on a win-win model as far as the outsourced product development is concerned. So we really do OPD, and we dedicate a team for a startup, because a team can totally focus on understanding the requirements, understanding the business, understanding the needs, and then accordingly go ahead, develop the choose the tech stack, and do the architecture, design, and development, and so forth, right? So we start small with a small team at cost, right? So typically it's a per month kind of fixed cost, uh, okay, that we decide. And then we also decide on the success fee, and when that will start triggered. I mean, that when that will be triggered based on when the startup starts making money, right? That's how the commercial models are decided, based on the 3 different offerings that D10X has.
Perfect.
So,
I think, yeah.
Uday, sorry, can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yeah, you had mentioned also that sometimes you look at an equity part, or some kind of an equity based on the product development cost or the revenue share cost.
Yeah.
How does that work? How would you be able to put a price to equity so early in the product life cycle?
Well, that's a good question, but frankly speaking, we have not come across any startup yet. My point of mentioning equity was just the flexible, I mean, just to convey that how flexible we are. We take the success fee in case of, as I mentioned, right, lump sum payment at some milestones, or it could be a revenue share, or it could be some stake in the equity, and so forth. But frankly speaking, we haven't come across any startup founders or any startups that are willing to share the equity. But coming
Okay.
back to your question, we are still open for that. So success fee, and the rewards can be then arrived at based on how successful we are as a team together. So we are in the game together with the companies we work with, and that is the whole ethos on which we work. Now the next part of your question was, how do we arrive at the equity, right? So it is purely based on the valuations, whichever method we use, whether it's cash flow or whatever. But valuation, as you know, is a very tricky thing, right? So you can mutually decide on the uh, what is the entry point, and what should be the, I mean, what, I mean, each side has to be comfortable with this engagement, and they should see the rewards and win-win. So that is the whole idea about equity sharing.
Okay. Okay.
I had a question.
Initial percentage, maybe something like a 5% or something small amount to start with. There can be something stock options, a sweet equity kind of, where we give you regular releases for every month and something, and in fulfilling those commitments, we get paid partly in efforts and partly in shares. So there are various ways we can structure that depending on the comfort of the startup company, comfort that we have with the startups. Because remember, we are working as a partner. If you start thinking of us as a supplier and whatever you order we have to do, that is not a really good kind of engagement, because that means then you will not get the good ideas coming from us to you. So if it's a kind of equal intellectual partnership, financial, how much proportion is a different thing, but ideally intellectually it should be a equal kind of partnership. And as long as we respect each other and trust each other, will be one of the philosophy that we want to work with people that who trust us and who we also trust, and that just by signing some contract you don't get that trust.
Yeah.
Sure.
No,
I think,
absolutely. Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
absolutely understand. It's a strategic partnership, really.
And again, it's a long
Almost like a
term.
partner.
It's a long term. So equity comes in pretty much late in the thing, and that's where I believe that they might have later on those cases to share with us, because they are just kind of building this up. I believe we have a question from Shifalika. Shifalika ji, आपका कुछ question था, I believe.
Yeah, I just wanted
Yeah,
to know.
please.
We're talking about a shared CTO kind of a model. So, is this like a retainer kind of a model wherein there will be a specific term for which you'll be associated with us, and a specific amount of days or a specific amount of times which you'll be spending, and specific amount of fees which you'll be charging for your time? Is that a retainer kind of a model?
If you're talking about CTO services, yes, it is like a written kind of model.
Okay, so is there a minimum term with which for which we'll have to subscribe to your services, or how does it work when it comes to 6 months or a 1 year or 1 month, or how is it?
It's very hard to predict that. We need to know how much time you need from us, what is the benefit. See, ultimately somewhere, the way I believe it is, while you may be small and initially you want a outsourced CTO, eventually at some point you will also want an in-house CTO. So we'll have to kind of get a judgment on when that will happen, and based on that we'll have to come up with a mutually agreeable arrangement. It's very hard to give an offhand answer to that and say it will be 3 months or 2 months and we will charge you this much.
Okay, so there is no minimum term as in itna retainer.
No.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Just last question, because I think we are overshooted on time. So maybe because, yeah, anyone? Okay, ठीक है. I take this as no, but let me just sum this up. So this shows the commitment of D10X as well. I really appreciate. I believe Surendra ji bhi hai on the call, the co-founder.
Yes.
your partner, right? So really appreciate all the three co-founders coming in along with Ajay Garg, who's facilitated this call. How I look at this is, as I said, I mean, when we started our conversation, and this for everyone to understand that rather than having any signed MOUs, it's much better that we work together on couple of projects. We may take it up as pilots. So
Right.
what we're going to do is, based on our today's presentation, we are going to ask, and rather, as I said in the beginning, we are going to share with the ones that are not present today as well, and then take kind of a
Hello.
survey that what are the kind of requirements that they have.
So the details,
So
email with details is to come in today.
sorry. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I think I have not checked it for half an hour. No problem. Yeah, I've received it. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Somebody is talking.
Yeah, that's okay. So first step is we'll share this with everyone, and then based on requirement, we'll see exactly if at all if we get 2 to 3 startups to start on a pilot mode, at least the discussions with you guys, and then have those interactions being formed. That's the first step. The second, like shared CTO levels, and then with few of the startups, we are going to be the facilitators, and we understand and appreciate your work in the segment and your expertise as well. And I'm sure a few of them might have very specific questions related to the needs that they have. So that's how we're gonna take it forward. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Really appreciate your time.
Uday, what I suggest is if you can share with all those startups my email ID and Anand's email ID. They may already received it in the invite.
Sure.
But if you can just share with them, they can contact any one of us directly.
नहीं वैसे हम लोग नहीं करते हैं. Normally what we do is we do it as a cohort approach. So what would happen is individually आपको भी आएगा. We cannot track that. So it will go through us, and then we are
That
always
is
kind of copied. Yeah.
perfectly
issue.
fine. Not an issue at all.
So that's a kind of, because again, I mean, at this moment we are talking of 20 startups. We are launching our second cohort. So
Okay.
again, we would have a more set of startups coming in. So it's better to do it in a combined kind of effort. Yeah.
Works for us as well.
Sure.
Good for us.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So really appreciate your time, everyone. Thanks a lot. And
thanks a lot,
we'll take
Uday.
this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was very very useful actually.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad
Thank
to know
you.
that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sheetalji. Thanks.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.